Uh, Thank you, Ben. Thank you all once again for being the brave and the few that stayed for the afternoon. In Rome, I organized lots of events for our own institute, and strategically, knowing Romans and Romanized persons like myself who take long naps after 1,300 hours, it's always a small miracle that people stay in the afternoon. So in this case, I don't think it's quite miraculous because the content is so good and so intertwined, and that one conversation leads naturally to the next. And I'm always never fully prepared to say what I want to say. I'm looking for some inspiration in the previous comments. And what a perfect segue in Mrs. Gore's naming of her employees associates. And that's one thing I was looking for in my reflections upon before speaking, was the fact that God, in the story of Adam and Eve, had entrusted his first children with so much. And we all know some of the two classic stories about Adam, that God had asked Adam to name the animals. And that was a sense of titling, given him ownership over creation. And of course, everyone knows that he asked him to be good stewards of the earth and to work and produce in abundance. The fact that Mrs. Gore calls her employees associates puts them on the level of ownership or stakeholders. And one of the great things we've learned from Thomas Aquinas, and as a segue from Father Guarnizio's reflections on the angelic doctor of the church, is his teachings on property and what it meant to hold things privately and what it meant to hold things in common. And before we show the video, let me just read what Thomas Aquinas has said. This is from his treatise on property. He says, "The second article concerns private property as such. There are two aspects of ownership. First, to take power, to take ownership, or give ownership of things. The second is the use of things. Each person is more concerned about procuring something that will belong to him and something that will belong to many or to all. If something, however, belongs to all, then each man will shirk his labor and tend to leave to others that which concerns the whole community. This is the case in a household where there are many servants. It's also the case in a bureaucracy. The individual bureaucrat has no reason to take on more work than he has, and has no personal stake in being more diligent about public property." It's incredible. It still holds so true today. "Human affairs are handled in a more orderly manner when each man takes care of procuring something as his own. Men live better in peace when each individual is content with his own things. When a group of people own something in common and without any division, it leads frequently to quarrels." So in our documentary Poverty Cure, as I was saying yesterday to those who missed the first episode, it was quite controversial in naming the documentary as such. It seemed to label us as quite utopian or idealist in terms of ridding the world of poverty, or material poverty. And that, in case, is not the fact with our work at the Institute. Our true ideal is to cure the world of spiritual poverty, and above all to work towards wealth creation based on a right anthropology in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And as Aquinas had synthesized and perfected so well in medieval scholasticism, it was the perfect segue to the massive growth and globalization in the Renaissance to come. In my graduate studies at Oxford University, I really came to love this tradition through the School of Salamanca, who built their series of natural rights in the Proto-Austrian School of Economics. Surprisingly so, on the fact that we could not trade with our brother humans in the New World if, in fact, they were not that did not hold title to their own land. If anything that was basic, most basic and most principal to human existence and human freedom is our natural tendency and right to own things as our own. And for practical consequences, as Aquinas most nobly says, that we take better care of them. And one of the nuances of American living for so long in Rome, as I have for 15 years, is that I frequently lived in community, or what we call condominiums here. In America, we loathe the apartment existence. It's seen as something to start out life with, something you get by with, but eventually move on to buy your own property. And as the lone American, well, apart from my 3 children who are now American, in a family of 20 in the same building, it's amazing how little care is taken for things that are held in common, and how much we bitterly fight over the most silly expenses and most easy things to fix. So it's actually true. It's frustrating as an American who's built his life and his whole society in the Judeo tradition of property rights, and to take care of things well because they are your own. The third episode in this series, I'll read you the exact title. I'm so used to the Italian. Let me grab it. We simply called Justice for the Poor. What we showed yesterday was called Charity That Hurts. So we talked a little bit about what international aid intends to do, but what it cannot do. It's good intentions of throwing money at the problem, but in effect it makes the problem worse. The second part of which was we will not see today, but it's called the entrepreneurial calling. The third part, which you'll see now, is called Justice for the Poor, and it's really a 20-minute segment on the rule of law and property rights. I wish I could have shown part 2, but it's just too much time. But the 3 are quite blended as a theme. Part 4 is what Father Guarnicio was talking about, providing the poor with networks and opportunity, and therefore we call part 4 Circles of Exchange, and that's what it's all about. And part 4 is the power of the gospel. It's finding the anthropological truths in Christ's own teachings that support a system of freedom and flourishing. And lastly, we could have called the last part, It Takes a Village to Raise a Good Individual, but we talk about the community, the churches, the parts of civil society and culture that sustain all of the preceding arguments. So without further ado, I will not say more because I think the video speaks quite for itself, and we can ask questions afterwards.